everyone, Micah Murphy here with Healing for the Nations. It is March 1st, 2023. I know I haven't made a video in quite a while, but a lot has been happening. We just came through February, a month of transition, and it was quite a transition. And now spring isn't officially here yet, but I can already feel the spring happening in the spirit, and you might be in the same boat as me, so to speak. I want to talk about the month of Adar, which is the Hebrew month that we're in right now. Today, Wednesday, it's Adar 8th. According to Jewish teachings, Moses was born on Adar 7th, and he died on Adar 7th. So that's just kind of interesting. Now, this is the month where Purim takes place, where it's celebrated, when when the Israelites were in Babylonian captivity, Haman was going to wipe out all the Jews. And it's said, and this gets from some of this right now, and I'll let you know what, but some of it comes from like ancient Jewish teachings. I think some of it comes from the Talmud. It's said that when Haman cast lots to figure out, I guess, or want to know when, because they were very like mystical, back then with a lot of things, kind of superstitious and different things like that. But when he cast lots to, when should we go and kill the Jews, he was excited supposedly that it fell on this month because it was also the month when Moses was taken from them. I guess the way he just felt like this would be, more of a blow, because Moses was who God used to deliver them, to give them the law, the Torah, everything. So the Israelites held Moses in high esteem, probably too much esteem when you relate down to it. But as you could probably tell, they didn't have Christ living in them like we do, and their entire race being in captivity. God sends a man, Moses, and this is the first time that they see miracles, and God reveals himself to them in the wilderness and things. So they held Moses in very high esteem. So what happened was, how Haman even came about was whenever Saul, the king of Israel before David, who was the people's choice, was king, Samuel, the prophet to Saul, Israel's first prophet after the judges, he told Saul, you have to kill, when you conquer the Amalekites, you have to kill everyone and everything. And if you're wondering why God would do that, it wasn't just because he enjoys violence. The Amalekites were a race of people who were continually offering sacrifices of their children to false gods. So that's almost like the highest form of evil, is to offer your children to false gods in God's sight. So think about that when you think about other things. But it got to a point also, the Amalekites would constantly come down in war with Israel, and God said, you have to wipe everything out, the people, the resources, their fields where they grow their grain and everything, their livestock, you have to wipe it all out. Well, when Saul conquered the Amalekites, him and his army, it says that they preserved all the resources basically that were good, okay, and the king. So what it's saying is the stuff that they liked, that they were supposed to wipe out, they kept, like the resources, we would call it resources, of certain cattle, certain things that look good, and the king. Well, because of this, Samuel came and prophesied by the word of the Lord to Saul that the kingdom would be taken from him. And the kingdom ended up, from that day forward, we see a slow transfer of people starting to support David, and eventually the kingdom taken from Saul. But you might say it began in the spirit that day, it began to take place. Okay, but why did I say all that? Because from that king, Amalek, descended Haman. So we see that who God told them to wipe out that they didn't, came a seed down the line generations later that actually came back and was going to wipe them out again. So if Saul would have obeyed God in the beginning, we would have never had a Haman. Okay, Haman was an Amalekite descendant, and there would have been no Amalekites if Saul would have wiped them all out. So that's just a good teaching right there, that if there's anything God is telling you to do, to give up in your life, and you don't do it, then, you know, there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. You know, there's certain things, if you don't want to create an Ishmael, you know, if God gives you a promise and you have the capacity to go out and create it in your own strength rather than waiting on God or doing the good instead of just waiting on the best. But this is even takes it a step further. This is saying that if you don't, you know, do and purge from your life the things that God is telling you. I'm not talking about walking according to the law. I'm talking about, you know, following God, getting things out of your life that He wants out of your life. They could come back to cause trouble. Okay? So it ended up that Esther took her place and, you know, saved the Jewish people. So we celebrate, Purim has been celebrated with the Jewish people since then. This is the month, Adar, that Purim is celebrated. So it's supposed to be a month full of great joy, like festivals of joy. Purim is a festival of joy. In the Jewish traditions, they consider this month full of joy, of good fortune, and things like that. Now, we don't believe in like astrology, but we do see in Genesis and parts of the Bible that in Daniel, different things they could do that. You know, the star with the wise men moved and followed them to Babylon. Well, the wise men, when you read the birth of Jesus following the star, it's pretty much known by historians that they knew this from the teachings of Daniel generations earlier when he was in Babylon. The same Daniel in the lion's den, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel's friends or colleagues. He had these teachings and he left it with them because whenever the rest of Israel returned to their home state, Daniel stayed in Babylon. So that's how they knew. They followed this star. And then if you read in Genesis, God spoke to Abraham more than once through the stars. Well, if you read this, the constellation that goes with this month is Pisces, and it's the two fish. And so if you just study that, fish live in water, and they say in Jewish tradition this is a good month to plant. So fish live in water. Water speaks to me of abundance. You know, if in Psalms, if a tree is planted by the rivers, you know, living water, if the tree is planted by good water, it'll nourish the roots, and you'll have good fruit. Then we also talk about the rivers of living water being within us. To me, also, the two fish speaks about maybe a double portion, or maybe even like when Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes, he took what was and increased it. Multiplication, double portion, more than enough. Which kind of brings me to my next point, is the blessing of Naphtali. Naphtali was the son of Jacob, one of the 12, you know, heads of the tribes of Israel, Naphtali. And his blessing by Moses was basically that you will have the blessing of the Lord will be great on you. Your favor with the Lord will be great, and you will take possession of the sea and the south. So it speaks of great blessing and favor. That's the blessing of Naphtali. So I want to, like, great blessing. I want to also talk about Malachi 3. Bring your tithes in your storehouses. Bring your tithe and your offerings to the storehouse of the Lord, so that we can test the Lord and see if he will not pour out a blessing, will not be room enough to receive it. God's been speaking to me about that. So if we want to walk in the favor and the blessing, we have to continue to walk with God, and one of those ways is the tithes in the storehouse, to bring the tithes to the storehouse that you have been assigned to by God to bring it. Then I want to talk a little bit about how Naphtali was born. Whenever Jacob he had Leah and he had Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and you know, we know that he went and worked for Laban. Laban deceived him, and After 7 years of working, he gave him Leah instead. And Laban was like, what are you doing? I mean, Jacob was like, what are you doing? And Laban said, well, it's our custom that the elder daughter marries first. So then Jacob worked another 7 years and had Rachel. Well, anyway, whenever Jacob married both of them, uh, Rachel was infertile. She wasn't fertile. So Leah began to bear children, and then also Leah's handmaid. And so when Rachel couldn't, she sent her handmaid to bear children for her. That's what they did back then. If you couldn't bear seed, you would send like your handmaid, and it would be like it'd be like it came from you, really. So they would stay in the line of blessing and inheritance from the father. So anyway, after Leah and Leah's handmaid is bearing numerous children for Jacob, Rachel gets her handmaid to go and starts bearing children. Well, Naphtali comes from Bilhah. Bilhah is the name of one of Rachel's handmaids, or the name of Rachel's handmaid that bears a child to Jacob before Rachel actually bears a child. Rachel ends up bearing Joseph and Benjamin. So Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, bears a child, and Rachel says, now I have strived with my sister and I have overcome. Okay. So what Naphtali literally means is my wrestlings or strivings. And it also means like to be cunning. So basically it's saying that Rachel believed that she was, in her wrestlings and her strivings, that she was cunning and that she got what she wanted. To me, that speaks of, the Bible says, we need to be, gentle as doves, but wise as serpents. So the enemy's cunning, but we need to be actually more cunning than him. And I want to talk about this cunningness for a second. And, in Jacob, the very man who married Leah and Rachel and is having these children that we're talking about, who had Naphtali. Well, before he was ever had any wives or children, he has him and his brother Esau. And the name Jacob means a deceiver. And there's so many teachings out there about this, how Jacob was a deceiver, Jacob was a deceiver. Well, I want to talk about it a little bit differently, because if you read in Hebrews, it says that it was said to Rebekah, which was Jacob and Esau's mother, okay? It was said to Rebekah that the elder will serve the younger. I'm sorry, that might not be in Hebrews, that's in Romans. It was said to her. So they had, the writer of Hebrews had revelation of this. It could have been even in, there's other books in the Jewish, halls of revelation that we don't have, that a lot of people can draw from. Some of the writers of our Bible actually draw from other books that aren't canonized. But however it was, it said that Rebekah, it was said to her, the older will serve the younger. Well, Jacob was the younger. So when you talk about Jacob and Esau, Jacob was the younger. So whenever Isaac is giving out his inheritance blessing, he goes and he's supposed to give Esau the firstborn blessing, which is a double portion. The firstborn always got a double portion of the rest of the men in the family. So she goes and she has Jacob put on, because it says Esau was hairy, to put on, skins of animal and probably change his voice. And he gets the blessing that Esau would have had by deceiving his father. However, Jacob's always talked about as the deceiver and stuff, but he was actually following his mother's instructions, because it's possible that they were still pretty young. And back in those days, everything worked differently. We see even Isaac didn't get married to Rebekah until he was 40. So, some of them were living even longer than we do now. So to be maybe, I don't know how old he was, to be maybe 20 or something was still considered pretty young. They were living at under their father's tent, So he listened to his mother. It says that the mother told him to do that. So I just want to point that out, because I think we judge what we see in certain things too much sometimes, and God is working through everything. Sometimes it kind of, just to be real familiar with you, I guess you could say, in a familiar sense, thoughts that I have, I'm sure you might have. You think, well, is God declaring this to Rebekah just because he knows what's going to happen? He knows that she's going to deceive. they're going to deceive him, or is he doing that to move her to do that? It's like you don't really know totally, but I just think that what we're supposed to get out of it is just, it says in Romans that all things work together for good to them who love God and are called. So God uses everything. And then we also see Rachel being cunning. We could say Leah, or maybe we could say Rebecca was cunning when she did that. We see Rachel being cunning, and a blessing ends up entering the house of the Israelites through Naphtali. And it's the blessing of the Lord, because Rachel, in her wrestlings, she was cunning, sent Bilhah to conceive Naphtali, and Naphtali's blessing was to bring great favor and blessing to the whole house, I believe. So, and as we're grafted into Israel, we partake of these blessings now. So, it is a month for a lot of blessing. It's a month of joy to celebrate, when your enemies are trying to come against you with Haman, that God raises up. And, but the thing about it is Esther had to take her spot. She had to take her calling. Mordecai had to tell her, for such a time as this, you've been brought in, you have to do it. So that means that we have to obey God. We have to do what he's telling us to do. We have to give up what he's telling us to give up. We have to go where he's telling us to go. He doesn't want us functioning. I was even reading something with in some Jewish teachings, and some Amalek means to sever, and there's some type of teaching where it was talking about as long as Amalek was fighting, he would always prevail. And so God said, you have to take Amalek out. They had to be severed away from what's going on. But since he left Amalek, then Haman rose up. So you have to sever everything that continues to come up and encroach on your blessing, because there are certain things in the spirit that that even manifest in the natural, that if you don't take care of, it will continually rise up and try to overcome you. So you have to do that. So anyway, a month of joy, a month of fruitfulness springing forth, blessings of the Lord. Just continue to obey, to rise up. And I do think it's interesting that Moses was born in this month, and he died in this month. I said the day. I'm not sure if the day 7th Adar is right or not, but he was born in Adar and died in Adar. So if that is something that, like, I could see from a Jewish standpoint, to see that as a great, our deliverer, died, but also he was born. So you could see, like, certain things might be dying, but at the same time, other things are being born. I think God has allowed the Bible to be written in certain ways to where whatever point we're in at times, that we can receive revelation. I do think that God uses numbers and time frames and just different things like that can give us symbolism to teach us things. Like some people, you might never read that Moses was born and died in the month of Adar, but you might come across it and you might, that's just another symbol of, like, death and then resurrection. And so there's a lot of things with numbers in that. Sometimes, research, what does the number 40 mean in the Bible? And you get a lot of different things where 40, 40, 40, and it can be encouraging. 40 was the year that they came out of the promised land. Like, personally, for me, I'm turning 40 next year, so that's encouraging. But I do want to encourage you to study the Bible, look into different things like numbers and symbols and stuff, because just don't obsess over it, and you don't want to be somebody who searches after signs, because Jesus said if you search after signs, you're a wicked, adulterous generation. Because if you're searching after a sign, it's adulterous, because it's like you don't trust God and his word enough. You have to have these other things. It's like it's like a bride going after somebody other than her husband, and it's like adultery, spiritual adultery, because you're wanting to trust in those things other than God. That's why he said, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after the sign, I'm the sign. But if God does times want to encourage you and give you a sign, like in Isaiah 7, ask for a sign. So, if you put those things in, but you don't obsess over them, and it can just, God can use them, the Holy Spirit can bring it up. I had times throughout my life over the past 23 years, I've studied the Bible a lot. I've immersed in some years and seasons of my life. I've immersed myself in it more. I've also studied back in certain like Strong's Concordance and Dake's Bibles and researched certain Jewish writings about the months and and just it's a good to do that because then the Lord can bring up certain things and instead of just seeing it as a doctrinal statement or a account of history, he can use it to help you with the things that you're going through now personally, like even number meanings and different things like that. So he can always bring it up. So I would encourage you to stay in the Bible whenever you can. So that's it. I hope y'all enjoy this, and I'll be back with y'all soon.